Hello, everyone. My name is Vito Quaglia, and this is A Matter of Principle. Today, our guest is Gianna Galli, a reporter for WBRE 2822 News, a local TV reporter and a local personality. Grew up in Northeastern Pennsylvania and has an opportunity to start off her career reporting the news to her hometown. So, a little bit of the Gianna story and how you got to where you're at right now.
Yes, the Gianna story. Where do we begin? So basically, I have grown up in Northeastern Pennsylvania my entire life, born and raised in Pittston. And I went to Pittston Area High School, was a Patriot, branched out to Penn State University in State College for 4 years there. And immediately I got involved in journalism, communications, if you want to think broader terms. And I started off in sports. I joined the Daily Collegiate, which is a student-run newspaper on Penn State's campus. And like anything, I had to start, from the bottom of things and really work my way up. And that started in covering different smaller sports teams. So men's soccer, men's volleyball. And I would, write little articles for the newspaper and attend media availabilities and go to home games. And there's so much fun to it. I loved everything from getting credentialed to just being able to attend, a really fun and neat sporting event to getting to know people on a deeper level and really what made them love what they do and what made them so good at it. And so I kind of fell in love with that process, and I stuck with journalism and writing up until about my junior year of college. And then my junior year came around, and that's when the pandemic hit. So, so much changed during that collegiate experience for me. And when it came time to attending sporting events and everything of that sort, so much of that kind of took a back seat. And so at that time, being a junior, I was looking for internships. And there's a newspaper called the Altoona Mirror, which is closer to Pittsburgh, that offered me a Penn State football experience. And so that was my dream in Penn State, was to work my way up enough in journalism and in sports to be able to cover, the football side of things, because obviously that's, what Penn State and, the Big Ten is known for. So that was probably a big turning point for me in this career, because I had known right away that, I felt a different spark, a different energy, and I really just loved being able to be in that environment, at Beaver Stadium, and getting to know sort of that dynamic of the school and the community in a different way. But I was doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff. So, writing for newspaper is a lot of writing for newspaper. You're not on TV. You're not in front of the camera. You're not exposed as much as you can be in the field of communications. And so that's when I kind of knew I wanted to get into something that was a little bit more hands-on, a little bit more me involved with the story. And so that's when I started getting into photography. And the end of my junior year going into my senior year, I started, working with a camera, and that's when I actually had the chance to photograph different sports at Penn State, football becoming one of them eventually my senior year, and I loved it. Got to be at multiple home games, out on the field, just all different kinds of dynamics between being with the Nittany Lion to, end zone to end zone for, whatever game it might be, and getting to kind of get that experience of being involved a lot more than what I was with the newspaper. But at the same time, I had so much experience from writing that really helped with even photography, believe it or not, and telling a story in a better way. So all of my experience was coming together. And so I was really excited about what I was doing, but obviously I was kind of running out of time with college. And that's when I started to get a little burnt out. I was in a spot where graduating Penn State, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go into journalism full time. There are a couple reasons for that. I had hit a spot where, coming out of the college scene, moving back home with your parents, with family, kind of losing that independent and that feeling of being with your friends all the time. And I kind of had this little bit of a health anxiety flare up come about. And so I had thought, you know what, I'm going to put journalism to the side for a little bit. And that's when I actually started thinking law school. And so I always wanted to go to law school. In the back of my mind, it was always there. I was a big criminal minds person, like many other people. And so I actually took my LSATs. I stood home for a year after college to focus on that. I knew, I'm not going to try going for my master's or going to, get a reporter position, none of that. And so I took my LSATs. I actually did pretty well, but there was something about it that didn't give me that feeling I got, being out in those stadiums and at Penn State and doing what I dedicated my entire college experience to doing. And so I, kind of changed my mind again and said, you know what, while I'm home, while I don't have to worry about, spending all this money or making these crazy decisions, and I could kind of save a little bit and, still get to be here in Northeastern Pennsylvania, I'm going to put the law career to the side for now. And I thought, if I went to school for 4 years for this and I, sacrificed so much and I put so much work in, I might as well give it a shot. So that's when I went ahead and I applied for BRE, and within a couple days, I had gotten a call from the news director at the time, Eric Nazarenas. And Eric really took a chance on me because I had no experience on TV. I had no experience in broadcast. All my experience was in newspaper photography and just kind of working in that industry of journalism and communications. And so he saw that in me, and he saw that I was passionate and, I had that, what we call now home field advantage. And within a couple days, I came in, I did an interview, got to meet everybody, and he hired me that Friday, offered me the job. And honestly, the rest is history. I would say that this past year and a half has honestly been one of the best so far for me. And I'm glad that I took and made the decision to go the route of, kind of what my heart is in and what I'm actually passionate about. And getting to do it in your hometown is such a blessing. And I am grateful for that every single day, because something a lot of people don't realize is that in journalism and in communications, and especially going to be a reporter on TV, you have to sometimes go far and make a lot of that sacrifice and take opportunities that you're really unsure of and take the risk. And, for me, it was a risk, but at the same time, getting to be here and be home is what made it so great.
Well, and I'll tell you what, that's a pretty cool story that you have, a cool origin story of where your career starting at. And you really got to do two things that, for every Penn State football fan, you were living the dream there. Being there, so close to the action, being able to interact with everything going on at the games and the players and, just the crowds and everything that is Penn State football. So you got to do that, which so many people that are Penn State fans are probably so jealous of that. And then, the timing of it, like you said, most people that go into broadcast journalism have to leave and take wherever that job is. It might be 20 miles away or, 4,000 miles away, whatever it is, to get your start. And for you to be able to have that opportunity right here in your backyard is twice you've had some really fortunate things happen to you, at such a young age, which is really, awesome for you. Now, I was going, you mentioned about, being a reporter in your hometown, and that's, a question I have. What's it like, to cover things happening, in the area that you grew up and you've been here your whole life. So when something happens and you have to, hustle to this thing, whatever it is, this location for this story, do you feel that, like, I get like the home field advantage, like you guys say at BRE and 22, do you have like, is it an easier kind of confidence with you that, hey, I know this area, I know these people, or maybe I know someone who knows these people, is that kind of an advantage for you to be able to go and ask those tough questions sometimes?
Yes, absolutely. There is so much more confidence backed behind everything I do because, the familiarity with the area and with the people and the communities. But at the same time, I have to say, one of the biggest things that I have come to learn with this job, and especially here in NEPA, is that when you think you know an area, or you think you know the things that go on, you really don't sometimes. And that's what's been, I would say, the surprise factor in everything for me, because there are so many more experiences that I have encountered where I was changed in different ways by the things and the places and the people that I've gotten to be with over the course of stories here. I mean, for instance, at BRE, we cover 17 different counties, and people don't realize kind of how far that expands. And, we go from Wayne County to Schuylkill County and all the way up into, close to the Philly area. And so we really dabble into a lot of communities that, people don't even realize exist in Northeastern Pennsylvania. And so it's broadened, my horizons of the area, and it's really been so cool to learn more about where I've grown up and the people that are here, because there's so much more going on than people realize. And, going out to different places though and covering, all these different stories each day, everything's different. It's always changing, having the ability though to kind of be in a place that I've known my whole entire life, but also feel so new to it at the same time. It's so cool. It's so cool. And there's a lot of times where, I think to myself, I'm lucky and I get to do something a lot of reporters wish they can do and wish they could be in. And at the same time though, like, I'm learning myself, and I'm in a spot where, like I said, there's a lot of things that I have yet to learn about this area still. And that's what I like getting to do every day, is show people like, hey, I grew up here, you grew up here, but there's things you don't know. And there's things that, I want to show you, and I want to be able to tell, this story and that story, or vice versa. I have the power of bringing national news and making it local. And so you asked, about kind of having that confidence and that ability to feel a little bit more comfortable reporting in the area. And that also translates into being able to talk about bigger topics. Like, you take the election for going on right now, being able to tie that in locally. And you would be surprised. I have to say, every single thing comes back to NEPA. There are so many people across the nation and in different states that have some tie to this area. And it's unbelievable. I mean, there are so many times where it'll be, something going on in a whole different country. Or if you take, like, an example I'll give you is Hurricane Beryl that just happened. There was a couple from this area that went on, I believe it was their honeymoon or a vacation to Jamaica, and they were kind of stuck in the middle of all this. And so it's just so interesting to, have that dynamic of this area being tied to other places worldwide and vice versa. And getting to be that kind of middle person is a really awesome feeling.
Sure. It comes with, I guess, a responsibility to make sure you tell the story the right way. You're representing not just your hometown, but you're representing all these stories that are connected to, Northeast PA, and, you're trying, and I think that's really cool way for you to start this career. I mean, you seem like you before you even knew you wanted to get into this, you wanted to tell people stories, you with the writing and then the photography. So you're coming at this from more, rather than just being a pure, person who's in mass communications. You were looking at something, you just wanted to tell stories and you wanted to tell them right. So I think that's, probably why you're having such, I wouldn't say a comfortable, it's probably, you're out of your comfort zone a lot of times, I'm sure, in your job, but the fact that where you're coming from is, I want to tell this story the right way, is probably the best way to be, a successful reporter, I think. I mean, I'm not one, but I would think that would show through when people are listening to what you have to say, that there's almost like that authenticity in what you're reporting. One of the things that you talked about, you couldn't believe how many things are connected back to Northeast PA. And we did a podcast a little while ago with Lindsay Griffin Boylan, who's the president and CEO of the Greater Wyoming Valley Chamber. And we were talking about that, how there's so much based out of Northeastern Pennsylvania, whether it's, our tradition, 250 years ago and how things shaped, the country as a whole, the Industrial Revolution and so many things like that, local history things. But then you brought up the election and this, what happens in Pennsylvania, specifically Luzerne and Lackawanna County, really changes the national scope of political things. So it's for people that grow up here, I think you take things for granted, like, oh, this is where I'm from, and you kind of get bored with it a little bit. But then when you take a step back and look at it with a fresh perspective, the way you are, you see the importance of everything around us. So that's really cool that you get to do that on a daily basis. So you said you didn't really go into this from the get-go. This is when you were 10 years old, I want to go be, a reporter. But were there any, growing up or being maybe even in high school, were there anybody that you looked to, was there a writer that you wanted to be like when you wrote things, or was there somebody on TV that you looked to and said, hey, I really like the way that person tells a story. I think I could do that someday. Was there anybody that was an influence when you were younger?
Yes, so a little bit less in specific certain people, but for me, it was more feelings and experiences. And to break that down, me and my family were avid Pittsburgh Steelers fans. And so, I've grown up going to the games and being around, that environment of just, one, the National Football League, two, the dynamic of people coming together for the same thing. And I really just always enjoyed and looked up to, whether I was at a game or watching TV, something that I did was, a lot of times I bonded with my father over, sports in general, but obviously the Steelers and, the different elements to what goes on when, you're watching, let's say, any kind of sporting event. And so there was always a time where you would have, the play-by-play hosts, the commentators, the reporters on the sidelines. And there were so many times where I, thought I wanted to be them. And as a young girl, getting to see females do that in that industry was empowering. And, there was such an adrenaline rush to want to grow up and do similar things like that. And I think as I got older and as I went into different parts of my life and career with journalism, I got to meet different people that kind of embodied that same feeling for me. So, when I was at Pittston Area, we didn't actually have too many journalism resources there, but we had one class and Mrs. Saunders was my teacher, and she just gave me opportunities. And there was something about her that, gave me that extra drive and that passion to want to keep pursuing the career, and that feeling of like, yeah, I could do this. And I kind of want to, do what she's doing. And I want to be able to tell a story like she could tell a story. And as I just got to that level in different ways, I encountered different people who gave me that same feeling. And, when it came time to Penn State, there were younger and older, female, male journalists, broadcasters that I really looked into. Erin Kate Dolan, she's with ESPN now. I mean, you take guys like Stephen A. Smith, just so many people that I feel like when you're in the position of dabbling in, like this kind of career, like the media and the news and broadcast in specific, there's so many people that you can look up to and that give you that sense of like, I want to be them. But at the same time, it's such a field where you kind of can't think too much about wanting to be a certain person. because everybody's path is so different. And so, there were so many times where I was like, and even now, there's so many people that Molly McGrath and Aaron Andrews, a lot of sports people I'm naming, but there's a lot of times where I still look up to them and I still think what they do is really awesome and I idolize them. And hopefully one day, I could be in their spot or something similar, but there's so many different paths. And so I've also recently have started kind of thinking of visualizing myself in my own path and, what that might look like and how it could be just as successful as other people's.
Well, and I think you're hinting onto basically defining yourself, being the best version of you that you can be and kind of creating your own brand, and I think that's where in my career in education, not a whole lot of, experience dealing with, media. I mean, I guess newspapers and interviews every now and then. But the one thing that always made me feel that it's basically trust, right? I mean, if a reporter called about something, especially if something was a sensitive topic or something that might blow up into some type of political football, if you had that relationship with a reporter that you've, had interviews before and they always, they were true to their word and they told the story the right way and they didn't change what you said to make it, to sell more papers or whatever it is. And then you build that relationship, then you kind of have that back and forth where that trust is there. And then I think as a reporter, you probably get a little bit more from someone who can trust you versus someone who might think, that's a little nervous that you might twist their words a little bit. So I think you're talking about, defining your own brand and being comfortable in your own skin of whoever that, whatever you're going to end up being, but having people to look to say, hey, that person who did it does a really good job. I could do something like that, but I want to be able to do it as Gianna Galli, which I think for somebody, again, so new in the career to have that kind of foresight to say, this is how I'll be successful if I'm successful as myself. It says a lot about you. I mean, you're mature beyond your years when it comes to that and starting a career. So just March 23, right? Is that when you started? I believe just about a year. So yeah. So you've only been in the game a little bit, but you kind of have some of those things that takes people 10 years to figure out. A lot of times people get so caught up in being the next Stephen A. Smith or, the next whoever that they don't take the time to be the first Gianna Galli, and that's what you were already talking about that stuff. So to me, you're way ahead of the game. So kudos to you on that one. And you gave a shout out to Mrs. Saunders there. So is there something that, and you hit on something that we talk about on this podcast a lot about the way she impacted you? Like you want to be able to tell a story the way she did, or the way that, her teaching style made you feel. And we talk about that a lot on here where, there's that saying that they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care type of thing. And that's, again, building relationships. Everything that we talk about on the podcast goes back to relationships. So if you invest time into a relationship and, then you're going to have more success that way. So were there instances with Mrs. Saunders or maybe somebody else where there was any kind of light bulb that you said, I guess you hinted on it that you talked about the way she kind of went about her business, but was there something that maybe stuck out even in her class or another person's class at Pittston that you still kind of remember today, whether it's a funny quote or maybe just like a little lesson that you learned there, or maybe even at Penn State? Is there anything that you brought with you into the work world that you got out of school?
Oh gosh. I mean, honestly, there's numerous of things. And when I think back to Mrs. Saunders, I would just think about how there was a moment where she had offered me this opportunity to kind of write a column. It was like an opinion column where we got to interview different people. And gosh, I forget now, but it kind of went in the bottom of the newspaper that would run like once a week. And it was like people's, opinions and takes on some silly stuff that was going on that week. So maybe it was getting their thoughts or opinions on what the, top rivalry matchup football game of the high school football game would be of the week, or something that was going on in the school district or whatever, And I just remember like times where I I wouldn't even know. I don't want to say not know how to go about it, but there were so many times where I could picture Miss Saunders being like, Gianna, you just have to do this. And Gianna, you just have to do that. And there's a part of me, no matter what I do, I'm always, an overthinker, and I'm always kind of looking to expand everything I'm doing. And, some people may or may not know our nighttime news anchor, Nick Toma, and he's come to be one of my great friends, great mentors.
I think he was
And
just
ultimately
playing drums for Flaxie Morgan. I think I saw somewhere, wasn't he?
He was, yes. He's a great guy. And well, listen, he's very talented on the drum set too, but he's a great guy and he's great to work with. And something he always tells me that I keep in mind every single day, whether I'm reporting or I'm anchoring. And recently I've been, keeping it in mind in my personal life too. It's 3 words, and it's just keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, that's what life is about. That's what the job is about. And so, it might come down to the way I'm writing a story, keep it simple. The way you're having a conversation with somebody, keep it simple. The way you're making a decision, keep it simple. And the list goes on. But when you realize it and you actually kind of listen to those 3 words, it's powerful. And so right now I would say, that is the biggest thing that has made an impact for me on a daily basis with not, like I said, not only this job, but just everyday life is, to keep it simple. Nothing's that serious. Nothing, don't overcomplicate things. And overall, it just is what it is. And, it brings me back to Miss Saunders kind of giving me that same advice over, an opinion column. And it's been a pattern that I've noticed for me, but definitely something that sticks and something that I would pass on to other people.
Yeah, because without that, I guess you have, what do they say, paralysis by analysis, where you just overthinking. There's no action. You're kind of stuck in the mud because you're so worried about the next step, you don't take the step. So that's everyone should follow that. Keep it simple advice. I think we get a little bit further in life. What do you think is the coolest part of your job right now? Like the thing that you really enjoy the most about what you're doing?
Ooh. Now that's a loaded question. I would have to say the coolest thing about my job that a lot of people, don't really realize is that it could be a blessing and a curse sometimes. And I don't want that to come off in a negative way, but I'm a real person, and I honestly, believe in people recognizing things as for, what they are. And as a reporter, it's tough. I have to deal with a lot of different things on a daily basis that I might not be ready for. I might never, be able to prepare myself for mentally, emotionally. And the job is always changing. And I say it's a blessing and a curse. And honestly, that it's the coolest thing right now, because before I wanted to become a reporter, I could have never have imagined what it would be like. And I've had friends try to tell me, this is what this industry is like, and this is what you're going to have to deal with, or this is what's really neat about it, and these are the, opportunities. But when you're in it for yourself and you get to see every single day how that change shifts, it's just sometimes it feels so unrealistic. Like you feel like you're sometimes in a dream, and it sounds crazy. But when I go from NASCAR weekend in the Poconos and getting to be with these national star athletes that are getting, recognized and praised from higher television networks than us, all the way to, independent reporters who are there trying to cover them, and getting to be in that environment, to literally within moments, the same day as the Cup Series race on Sunday, an attempted assassination against a former president, and having to switch a gear and kind of switch my entire, mindset and what you're doing and the environment changes, and getting to be in so many high and low moments of people's lives and what they do and experience and what happens to them. And sometimes it happens, in the same day, like that experience, or other times it could change within a week. Getting to be involved in that, cool is like an understatement, because it ultimately has changed me a lot. It's changed the way I look at things. It's changed the way, I've thought about things, and it has been really cool. It's been cool to get to be a part of such big, world things that happen. And not every day is like that. Some days it's, a pizza shop opening up down the road, but other times, you get to be in these big moments in people's lives and these big moments in the world and here in Northeastern Pennsylvania. And it really is cool.
Well, and I think you get that you have the opportunity, to help people have a front row seat to life. You know what I mean? So you're right there, and in your job, you get to paint the picture, set the narrative to what's happening. And I think that's kind of a really awesome responsibility, to make sure that you're telling it the right way. I mean, there's something, really, it's impactful. Things are, even it could just be a small little thing, but it's very impactful maybe to that block, in this borough. But so you're going to have to tell that story, or, is it something on a national stage? Regardless, you're there, and you're the conduit between what's actually going on and then all the viewers and listeners, paying attention to what's going on. So that's really a cool, that's not even cool. That's really an awesome responsibility to do that the right way. Then here's a question I'm going to ask. And I think this is something, I mean, I have my own personal opinion. I'll tell you when you give me your answer, but what's it like to gauge, like you said, keep it simple, which is a perfect way to say that. But when something, when you're reporting something, that balance between almost over reporting versus standing back and almost just letting the story unfold on its own. Do you kind of have to, like, is there like something that goes off in your head about, well, wait a minute, maybe I should do a little bit less here or a little bit more there when you're feeling out how to report a story? Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand that question?
Yes. Great question. So there's different elements I can touch on with this, because, and that's all part of, honestly, my experience still, learning in this industry and being so young, is that's the whole process, is kind of getting to that point where you can tell a story, at the snap of your fingers, and not overcomplicate it and get it out the way it needs to be. But what I've learned so far, and a lot of what, I try to think of, not just every story, but every sentence I write, is the fact that you're, and I've been told this by a million people, and I like to, rephrase it, but is you got to think about you're talking to somebody who might be in third grade.
Sure.
Or,
yep.
Keeping it at the sense of, we're the cliff notes. We are the basics. TV especially is, we say leave the details to the newspaper, and TV is supposed to be something where you turn on the TV, your audience wants the facts. They want the who, what, when, where, why, all the basic things that you learn, 101 journalism class. And that's ultimately what you got to think about. But at the same time, you want to make sure you are backing up, what you're saying. And so if it takes doing that, then that's where I would say, you're keeping it simple in what you're saying, but you're still elaborating on what needs to be elaborated on. And to get into a different element of this, bringing Nick Toma back into the picture, he always gives me this advice, and I, again, think what he said to me has a lot of value. And he always says, when you're writing a story, especially with TV and with broadcast, every word out of your pocket, think about it as being $1 or, some kind of change. So you don't want to be spending all this money ultimately. And so, when it comes to the way I deliver a story, you really just want to think about, what's the importance here? Who is it affecting? And why does my audience care? And by doing that, you kind of, ultimately break down your people, your place, your goal, and then why the story you're telling has a purpose. So all of that, learning how to, make all of that simple is basically, the end picture and what you want to accomplish.
Well, there's a lot that goes on, behind the scenes of a 32-second clip that someone might see when they're, eating their supper at 5:00 and they're watching the news broadcast and they just see a little blip and, the reporter there says a few words about something that just happened before the next reporter says something, and it's digested by the audience so quickly, but there's so much that happens behind it, not to mention the fact that someone has to make the determination whether or not it's actually newsworthy to begin with, what I mean, before they send someone there. So there's all that behind the scenes. So yeah, there's a lot that people that don't do it for a living probably don't even realize happens. Now, one thing that local news gets to do a lot of, when you watch stuff happen on TV, is get involved with different community causes. It seems like maybe some of the people who've been around a longer time and, have more of a persona that has been in Northeast PA, get to do more of it. But is there anything out there that when, if you get opportunities to, you want like a community cause in Northeast Pennsylvania that you want to maybe help out or anything like that? Is that stuff started to come into your mind, or is that something that's down the road for you?
Oh gosh. I would say that that's always been something on my mind ever since, to do something in life bigger than myself. And, ultimately that's why I've always kind of chosen career paths that would allow me to do something in that regards. And so, when I say I like telling stories about people, it's not necessarily like I want to, tell people what you did and, how you did it and then put it on TV. It's more just like, I want to be able to change something here and make an impact for you and for others. And so, yeah, down the road, I would love to, I've always been involved in whether it was volunteering programs or organizations or, community events like that at college. I'm always looking to expand on that as I expand in my career. And so, when it comes to like BRE, we have so many different campaigns that we have that we get to be part of, like Hunger Free Summer, where we're raising money and, collecting food donations for people, who don't have that ability and who are going, starving throughout the summer months. Or we do coat drives. And that's what's so cool about this job too, is you get to be that person while also doing the job. And I never want that to change. I really haven't thought like long term about what that could look like, but getting to, do something like those kind of, events here, I could only imagine what it would be like at a bigger level, and getting to be a part of that would be amazing. So, anytime that I can give back and like, getting to do that every single day, but in a different way where you're directly giving something or getting something for somebody is incredible.
Well, and that goes to, a lot of things that I'm familiar with, my career, teaching and, being an educational leader, things like that, and coaching. We're all those roles, you're a role model, whether you're a teacher in front of a class or if you're coaching a team or if you're, in charge of a department or a building, things like that, you're kind of modeling your behavior for the people that are watching what you're doing. And I mean, ultimately, you guys are doing that when people tune in and watch. Now they're watching you to hear about the story, but then, once you're out there and you're a public person, everything you do gets magnified. It's almost like everything, if someone sees you somewhere, they're not going to differentiate, Gianna, the news reporter versus Gianna, the private person sometimes, so it's almost like, you're a role model, whether you want to be or not, just because you have that public persona. Is there anything, like, do you think of that as something, that you wanted to, like, going through high school and going through college? Do you think about, hey, I might end up being in a position where I can really influence, so many people, and or is that something that, like, wow, this is just one more thing that's, that I'm talking about that is this like, why is he bringing this up? Now this is more things I have to worry about with my job. But I mean, see, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's something where it's not, you probably didn't go into it thinking, I want to, be the person that's influencing all these people. But in essence, that's what you guys do whenever, people watch what you say. And with Nick Toma's advice to you about, choosing your words wisely and things like that. So you're a leader, and being a leader in this community, is there something or something maybe in the last year that you've been there, been on the job, like a leadership lesson that you've learned, aside from the keep it simple, because that's something where, we have to put that in the bank. We can't go back that one. But is there a leadership lesson that you've learned on the job, or maybe, maybe at home from your family, something where you're like, I get to use that to be a good leader?
Yes. Being in my position, reporting and kind of being, the low man on the totem pole, everybody constantly says it. There's still so much that you can, lead by example with. And there's still so much that you can learn from of people that have been in the business, for 50, 60 plus years. And something I'll tell a little, like, it's not really a secret, but it's something that I think is almost a game changer to the job I do every single day. And it really wasn't something I was ever taught, but it was just something that I believed in doing, and I think makes such a difference. And I think whether you're somebody in a leader position or not, it's something that everybody can have the ability to do. And, okay, so when I'm doing an interview with somebody, a lot of times every day, whether, no matter where I am, I'm on a time clock. I have a deadline. And sometimes, that's hard to meet. And, you're trying to put a story together. You're trying to, work, multitask, a lot of different roles at once. You're trying to worry about being live. You're trying to worry about editing. You're trying to worry about, people calling you. And then at the end of the day, you still are trying to just care about people and make a connection. And there's so many times where, let's say I'll be in an interview with somebody and I can easily get what I need and leave, or, try and get from them what I need to get from them. Like, a certain kind of interview dynamic about the topic that's going on. And ultimately, there's probably reporters out there that kind of step into doing that and call it a day. But I'm a person who I like to take an extra 15, 20 minutes to get to know the people that are in my story. And so that might cost me, and it does a lot, time on the other end, writing, editing, whatever it might be. I might have to, think about my scripts a little bit quicker than I would like to before I have to go on air. But I think that doing that and being a personable person and having empathy has ultimately been such a leading change for me, because anybody can figure out how to do the job, and anybody can figure out, how to write a news story. And not everybody can care, and not everybody can step into that position and kind of, put the person who isn't in front of the camera or who is having that difficult day or that great day first. And so I think, whether, again, you're in any department in this field or any field, whether you're a boss or you're the new candidate coming in, the intern, whoever it might be, I think that a big leadership thing I have learned is to just care and to be empathetic, and to, no matter what, at the end of the day, it's a job, and, that day is going to come and go, but those people and that impact that you've made on them isn't. And that's how, people remember you. And that's what I think is important, is whether, you're new to the game or you're a vet, the impression you make is what matters. And that has been ultimately, a leadership change for me, for sure.
Well,
And I think it should be for everybody.
yeah, and that's universal. And I think, and it's terrific that you went in that direction, because that's so much of what we talk about on this podcast, is that leading with empathy, and leading with, like you said, anyone can walk in, do your job, and go home. It's a lot of times what we do in any career, is once you get it, once you get that little formula, you can bang it out and go home, and that's that. But when you take that extra moment to just understand the person on the other, on their line, on the phone, or the person in front of you, whatever it is, and just take that beat, that pause, and listen. We talk about this all the time. My grandmother used to say you have two ears and one mouth, because you're supposed to listen twice as much as you talk, so just being that person and hearing what's going on. And my co-principal and I, we at Riverside right now, we have a saying we use all the time. It's coins in a jar. When you're doing that, and you're taking that time, and you're building that little relationship with whoever you're investing in that relationship. And down the road, that's going to pay dividends, because people can then trust you, and then if when something happens, it's, and there's adversity, you have to persevere. It's easier to rally with people, or to see that person like, hey, I have this collective memory that they listened to me when I needed them most, things like that. And you're right. It's kind of simple. It should be common sense and standard operating procedures for people, but it really isn't. So when you do things like that, you stand out, because as much as it's how we all were raised it doesn't matter where you were raised or by whom, it's crazy how it goes away once we all get jobs, and certain things turn cutthroat, and everyone's worried about advancing so they get more money, or they get more, likes on their Instagram, or whatever it is that makes us feel that we're important. When it all comes down to it, it's about relationships, right? And again, for somebody who's so new to the business, and, for you to have that perspective it's really, I have faith in mankind now, because this generation, can still do it. And it's funny, because my children, my Vito and Dominique, went to school right around you. So I see them starting their careers at the same time. And it's just, you wonder what the next generation, what your generation is going to do. And everyone I talk to of that age really has that mindset. It's a lot of like sacrificing for the community you live in, and for, whatever group of people you're working with, which is really refreshing, because for a long time, that wasn't what people talked about. Everybody was talking about me first, and, moving up the ladder quickly. But it seems like the younger generation really has it together. And that makes us older people, you guys will be taking care of us someday. That makes us feel good. So I'm glad you're saying those things. But you, moving forward, you said something about, you didn't know where this is going to be long term, when we talked about different community causes and whatnot. But where do you see yourself in 10 years, 15 years down the road? Is this something that, do you have a 10-year plan, a 20-year plan, or do you just kind of go with the flow? Like, what are you thinking?
It's funny that you asked this. So I've actually just had one of the biggest, I would say, decisions and choices to think about like the last couple of weeks.
This isn't a spoiler. This is a spoiler alert on the pod? Okay.
It's okay. It's not too much of a spoiler. I basically, I have, I'm a news reporter, but I have done sports, and I have anchored at WBRE, and I love all three. We've had some changes in our station with people leaving. And so there's been, decisions that I was thinking about the last couple weeks or so, about kind of staying in news or going sports, or, basically there was two options, and one was to stay in news and to get to do all three, or taking a risk in sports and kind of passing up on, my news and my anchor experience and putting that on hold for a little bit. And I am a very indecisive person, I'll say that. But I, for the past couple of weeks, have, had to do the pros and cons sheets, and, the talking to, everybody I know, and all this stuff. And at the end of the day, I've realized that, I've been told a lot of advice over the last couple of weeks, and a lot of wisdom on, what could be right for me and, what to follow and what could be best for my career and where my heart is. And, ultimately in my mind and in my heart, I've just kind of come to the conclusion that no matter what path it is that I'm going to take, and no matter what it is that, I decide is right for me, it'll be okay. And it'll be something that, is meant for me eventually. And so I'm telling you this because when you ask kind of what I want to do, or where I see myself 10, 15 years from now, I struggle to think about, if that's something I could picture yet, because I didn't even honestly picture this position. Like I was thinking law school and I was thinking this, I was thinking that. And, I followed my heart and I went with this choice and here I am. And I would say that, I love getting to be here in my hometown, and going anywhere else would be very difficult for me to do. And my contract, will be up with BRE in about 7 to 8 months. So March, of 2025. And I'll have to make some decisions at that time. But I just see myself still making that impact and still making that change. And hopefully, it's in this business. Hopefully I get to still pursue a career and, I do want to climb, the ladder. I would love to, do what I'm doing at an even bigger level. But there's times where I don't know that yet. I don't know in kind of what avenue that is and what it is I see myself doing. And right now, getting to have my options so open and get to dabble in each thing is like the best part of getting to be home and doing this job, because, not everybody could say that they've gotten to have opportunities in all three categories of news, sports, and anchoring. And I have. And I think that creates a lot of different paths for me. And so figuring out which one it is I'm going to go down, not sure yet.
Well, I think you have several tools in the toolbox, right? Which was all a good thing. That's another thing that, when I talk to people of young professionals now, I think that you guys, let's face it, you're none of you guys are really going to be in careers for 35, 40 years doing the same thing. Those days I think are long gone. It's very rare that people stay in the same kind of job for that long. There's so much movement and there's so many opportunities that happen. And it's just the way of society. People, honestly, I don't think people have the attention span to do the same thing for that long anymore. It's just the way we live. So for you to have, you're getting these opportunities at an early part in your career, and you're starting to, you're putting all these experiences and saying, okay, I'm comfortable doing this, and this is something I want to maybe broaden over here. So you're handling it the right way. You're kind of taking what comes and build on what feels right, when the time comes, and not pigeonholing yourself, which I think is, again, the big thing about, I think, the 2024 and beyond is really just learning to learn. Just keep learning things, new skill sets, because you can always, you keep evolving. And that's like we talk to our students in school now. Everything's so entrepreneurial. The resume process is not what it used to be. So much of it now is digital, and it's really, showing real life experiences and having TikTok videos to show what you can do versus a paper resume. As crazy as it sounds, that's where things are going, where everyone's going to have this little digital portfolio that explains this is who I am, versus that, your transcript and your resume, maybe like you did 10, 15 years ago. So no, I think your story is a story of a young professional in 2024. And these are the things that are happening. So it's really, I'm glad that, anyone who's listening to this is going to hear that. And it's really a neat thing for somebody to do that in their backyard. It'd be one thing if, you went to school and then you had to move 400 miles away to do this, but you get to do all this with that, the blessing and the curse of having it in your own backyard, because now you have all the people that maybe knew you from when you're, a little kid, riding your bike in the neighborhood, and now they watch you on TV. So you can have the people that are your number one fan and the people that, didn't like you when you're 8 years old, that kind of thing. And you know what I mean?
Yes, exactly.
So, but I do think and that's one thing that you mentioned before about the home field advantage that you guys have. You guys are really celebrating that. So many of the people that work there have ties to Northeastern Pennsylvania. And I think that's what brings people to the screen, that they could trust, hey, that guy grew up, and he went to school with my cousin. So I'm going to listen to what he has to say, or, she lived down the road, that kind of thing. And I think it's a good move, because there's there's 1,000 channels, right? Why are people going to watch you guys? Well, there has to be a reason, and you're capitalizing on the Northeastern Pennsylvania connection, which is really cool. Next question for you is, what is the most interesting story that you've covered so far, or maybe the most interesting person that you've interviewed so far? What would pop up?
Oh gosh. All right, I'll give you a couple. We'll talk about a couple things. We'll start with news, because I'll touch on news and sports. So my mind wants to go right to something in news, and ultimately it is, a sad story and very unfortunate. But I have been getting into investigative reporting a lot more the last couple of months, and I enjoy it a lot more. I enjoy the, investigative stuff, the research stuff, the criminal stuff. The harder news is, what it's known for. And so my mind goes right to this one story that was breaking news the one night, of a young 13-year-old girl who had killed her mom and really badly hurt her brother. She was immediately, taken into custody, and it was a lot. It was the first time that I ever had to be in the same room when she was placed in the corrections facility that night. It was the first time that I had to be in the same room as somebody, who committed such a crime. And, you're trying to do your job, but in your mind, and, there's all these other things racing and all this other stuff that, you're trying to kind of control and think about, and emotions. And for me, that was an experience that was so different than a lot of others that I've done, so far with this job. And gosh, it was just, one of those where getting on TV that night and writing that story, it was so hard to feel composed. And I mean, there's so many times where you have no choice, and you have to just roll with the punches, and you have to be able to, get in front of that camera and get the job done and meet that deadline. But going back to like the empathy thing is, you're trying to understand the whole situation, and you realize, you're human too. And a couple other stories that touch that, would be Detective Kyle Gilmartin, in Scranton. I'll never forget the day he returned home from rehab. I mean, probably one of the most heartbreaking experiences I've ever been in, seeing him being able to talk and walk and with, his family and thousands of people who were equally, on the same emotional level. And again, having to do a job and just being in that environment, it just so changing. And, another one I think of that is similar to that is two moms out in New Philadelphia. Both of their sons were murdered, and this lady, she sews teddy bears, and so she wanted to make them one. And I actually had an exclusive interview set up with this lady making the bear for the one mom. But what I didn't know was going to happen at the time was I got to see her give it to her for the first time. And it was a surprise, like she didn't know. And this teddy bear was it was crafted, handmade for this mom with all these different symbolisms of her son. And it was just, again, so heartfelt. And it's those kinds of stories that have changed me as a person in this field. And even thinking about them now, like, chokes me up in different ways. And then the sports side of things, I go from that to getting to see what the USA, gymnastics team is going to be wearing competing in the Olympics. And me and our photographer that went to the factory in Reading, Pennsylvania a couple months ago, we were the first ones to see the leotards, and it was such a cool experience. They were embargoed, and, we basically got to hold them and see how they're created. And then you see these Olympians, on national television, like opening them and competing in them and, feeling great in them. And again, knowing that that's happening back here is it's so cool. And I would say that those are a couple of my top stories that, has made such a significant impact on the things I've done as a reporter so far. And I mean, the list goes on.
Well, sure.
To be honest, there's so many, but
well, no, and
those have been the moments.
You hit on, I think, two of the things that really are characteristic of what your career is, and it's privilege and it's responsibility. I mean, so you have the privilege to be, in the front row when those things happen, and there's really, there's nothing like just being witness to unvarnished truth. I mean, for all the good and the bad and warts and all, I mean, you're right there when things happen sometimes, and then you have to, be professional and report it the best way you can. But you're still a human, what I mean? So it's, and again, it's that responsibility of then you're the eyes and ears for all of us who are watching to kind of, you're the conduit to get that information to everybody at home. So we kind of get the best idea of what just happened. So it's really, you're really in an interesting, for lack of a better word, career that is ever changing, never boring. Despite what people think about Northeastern Pennsylvania not being the most exciting place, we all know that there's a whole lot of stuff that happens around here, and things that happen here make impact in other places, whether it's nationally or internationally. There's so many things, like you just referenced, the things that were created, manufactured here are going to be on the Olympic stage. So that you never know what's going to happen that has a connection to Northeast PA. So we're going to wrap up soon, and I just want to, again, echo our gratitude for you coming on as a guest. I think we learned a lot about what it takes to be a reporter in 2024, and for somebody who, is a person who's born and bred in Northeast Pennsylvania to be able to do that and to hear all your experiences in such a short amount of time that you've been doing this, but you've been, exposed to so many cool things. It's really fun to hear your story, and we're going to throw out the invitation to come back, because I think we'd like to hear, what it's like in 6 months or a year from now and what other experiences you've had. So thank you so much, Gianna, for being a guest on the podcast. Any last words you want to say to the audience before we cut it out?
Oh, well, first of all, you're very welcome, and thank you, because this kind of stuff is what I love to get to do, is, especially getting to talk about my career, my experiences, and the people I get to meet. It's awesome to be able to do that, on a platform like this, especially, with somebody I know and somebody that, I went to school with. And again, this is kind of, firsthand of what I'm talking about, with just getting to, expand everything in this community and here in NEPA. And it's awesome to do that every single day and get to call it a job. So thank you. And I would love to be back. So yes, please.
We're going to hold you to that, no doubt. And again, we just want to let everyone know that, you'll see you're on. When are you on? What, as of right now, when we speak at the end of July here, what is your schedule on the news when people could tune in and see you?
Yes. So I will lay that out for you right now. So I am Wednesday through Sundays. I work 3 to 11, and our shows, the way they work is, we have a 4 o'clock, a 5, a 5:30, a 6, a 7, and an 11. I'm always going to be on the 11 o'clock at night. And then it depends sometimes if there's breaking news or whatever the story, may prompt, I'll be in the earlier shows. So the 4, 5, and 6. So catch me at night. I will be on at night, but yes. And, obviously if people want to reach out,